This is Robin's Folly Coffee Quick Hitter. Let's go. A Folly Coffee Quick Hitter is a 5 to 7 minute answer about a common coffee question. And today's question is a question I get all the time. If there is a time existing, I am hearing this. So I'm hearing it all of the times. And this question is, which has more caffeine? A light roast or a dark roast? And the short answer is, there is no major difference in caffeine content between light and dark roast. If you take the same coffee bean and you roast one batch light and one batch dark, there's going to be no major notable caffeine content difference between those two beans. Where you will see a difference in caffeine levels is the species or the family of coffee. Now, hopefully you're only drinking Arabica coffee. There are two major families of coffee, Arabica and Robusta, or Robusta, depending on your pronunciation. Arabica coffee is the better tasting, the higher quality of the two coffees. It's grown in more favorable conditions. Robusta is grown at lower elevations. It's cheaper coffee. It's kind of bitter and rubbery. Robusta does have a much more significant caffeine content than Arabica coffee. Hopefully you're only drinking Arabica coffee because it actually tastes good. And there are some differences between the species within Arabica, but in my experience, the different levels of caffeine within the different species of Arabica is not enough to notice it while you're drinking it. Well then, why is it when I hear of an espresso bean, it's so much stronger? Or, well, I like a nice strong dark roast. I need the caffeine. I like a really strong dark roast. These are myths. These are not real. But here's what I will say is sometimes you get the flip side. And this is the funny thing, that when I'm sampling coffee or talking to people about coffee, they go, I heard that light roast has more caffeine. I hear that dark roast has more caffeine. And these are, so you hear both ends of the spectrum about the complete opposite idea. But I think maybe more commonly you hear, well, light roast has more caffeine. That's probably why I get all jacked up when I drink light roast. I think the reason this happens is because dark roasted coffee is much more likely to be bitter. And bitter is a very intense flavor. If you use more coffee beans per cup of coffee in a dark roasted cup of coffee, it's going to get more bitter. So in my experience, like with office coffee, the ratio of coffee to water is much, much lower. Because that intense bitter flavor, you don't need as much coffee for that bitterness to come through. And so you can't really use more beans or it starts to be unpalatable. Whereas with a light roast, if you amp up the ratio of coffee to water, the flavors of the light roast will become more prominent. So if I've got like a natural Ethiopian, those blueberry flavors will just become more prominent as I add more coffee. So typically, people will use a higher ratio of light roasted coffee versus dark roasted coffee in the final cup. So you could make an argument that a light roasted cup of coffee is more likely to be stronger than a dark roasted cup of coffee, but that is not because the bean itself has a higher caffeine content. That is simply because the ratio of coffee to water is higher. There is more actual coffee grounds being used in that cup, more extraction, more caffeine. So when you see some of these brands be like, we're the world's strongest cup of coffee, or like, we're going to get you jacked up, it probably uses a fairly significant portion of Robusta or Robusta coffee. Same difference. And it will give you a very high caffeine content, but that coffee will also taste like rubber. If you could picture what the smell of a burnout in a car, like a car peeling out of a parking lot, tastes like, that's what Robusta or Robusta coffee tastes like. But I'm just talking Arabica because that's the coffee we dabble in and the one I recommend that you drink. So there's the longer version of it. There is no major caffeine difference between light roasted and dark roasted coffee. The only differences occur between families of coffee, Robusta, and Arabica, and negligible differences between species within Arabica. I will end this like I do everyone and say, have a nice day.